You're listening to Barske Studio True Crime. The story you're about to hear is just one of many hidden in the shadows of Nordic history, based on true events. No emotions, no bias, just facts.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking into the case of Dennis Andrew Nilsen. He was the Scottish serial killer active in North London between 1978 and 83. A really chilling story.
Absolutely. And our goal here isn't just, a simple retelling. We want to quickly synthesize the source material, his background, his very specific methods, and crucially, the systemic failures that let him operate for 5 whole years.
5 years is a long time.
It is. And just to set the scale right away, Nilsen himself confessed to killing 15 or 16 young men and boys. But he was only convicted for 6 murders and 2 attempted murders in the end.
Wow. That huge difference between the confession and conviction.
Mm.
There's so much already. You have to ask, where did this all start? Let's look at the foundations of his life.
Okay. So Nilsen was born back in 1945 in Fraserburgh, Scotland, his early home life. Well, it was marked by unhappiness. His parents had a pretty short, difficult marriage.
And after they divorced?
He and his mother moved in with his maternal grandparents. And the sources consistently point to one really key defining trauma involving his grandfather, Andrew White.
He had a strong bond with him, right?
Very intense, yeah. Nilsen saw him as this sort of great hero and protector. But then, when Nilsen was just 6 years old, his grandfather died very suddenly.
And the traumatic part was?
What happened next? His mother took him to see the corpse. Nilsen later claimed that specific moment caused an emotional death for him, like he's sort of disconnected from reality right then.
That's deeply disturbing. Connecting that fascination with a dead body he felt protective of all the way back to childhood. But it wasn't just psychological, was it? His later skills.
Yeah.
They came from his career path.
Exactly. It's this really strange duality. He joined the Army at 16 back in 1961, spent 11 years as a cook in the Army Catering Corps.
So he learned discipline and butchery skills.
Practical butchery skills, yes,
Yeah.
Which become horrifyingly relevant later. But then his next step is almost hard to believe. He joined the Metropolitan Police briefly in 1972.
A policeman.
Just for about a year. But the sources highlight that even then, as a junior constable, he was drawn to the morbid stuff. Visiting the morgue, looking at autopsied bodies.
So you have the methodical skills from the kitchen and this morbid fascination from his time, however brief, with the police.
It's a potent mix. Add in deep loneliness, especially after his partner David Galichin moved out around 77.
Right, that seemed to be a trigger point.
Yeah, he struggled with alcohol, with confusion and shame about his homosexuality. And then about 18 months after Galichin left, December 1978, the first murder happened.
Which brings us to the actual crimes, starting at his first address, 195 Melrose Avenue. He lived there from 78 to 81.
And this is where the majority of the killings took place.
What was the pattern? Who was he targeting?
He went after vulnerable young men, often boys too, homeless, runaways, people struggling. He'd lure them back to his flat, offer them drink, food, maybe a place to stay, sometimes sex.
And once they were inside?
He'd kill them, usually strangulation, using ties, electrical cables, sometimes drowning.
But the killing wasn't the end of it, was it? The sources describe these rituals. Did he dispose of the bodies right away?
No. And this is where you see the deep pathology. He needed control, maybe companionship. He kept the bodies, sometimes for weeks, even months.
Kept them.
He'd perform acts of care, washing them, dressing them. He often slept next to them. He even called them, chillingly, a new kind of flatmate.
That speaks volumes about the loneliness, the need for intimacy he could control completely. But obviously, he couldn't keep them forever. What was the disposal method at Melrose Avenue?
Okay, so once decomposition started, the flies became a problem. That's when the butchery skills came in. First, he'd hide the remains under the floorboards. When that wasn't enough, he used the stone kitchen floor to dismember the bodies with a large knife.
The sources mention boiling.
Yes, boiling the heads, hands, and feet, the identifiable parts, to remove the flesh. Then the cleaned bones and soft tissue were burned in bonfires in the back garden.
Bonfires. In a London garden.
Yeah. Sometimes use old car tires, apparently, to try and mask the smell. It's almost unbelievable. At least 12 men killed there at Melrose Avenue, but only 4 were ever identified.
Just 4 out of 12, possibly more. Then things changed in 1981. He moved.
Right. His landlord wanted to renovate, offered him £1,000 to leave. This forced him to quickly get rid of any remaining evidence before moving to a new top-floor flat, 23 Cranley Gardens.
And the new place. it created a problem for him.
A massive problem. No garden meant no more bonfires. No floorboards meant nowhere convenient to hide bodies. So he had to switch to disposal method 2.
Which was his fatal mistake.
Absolutely. It was messier, riskier, and it's what led directly to him being caught.
He was still dissecting the bodies.
Yes, but now he stored the larger parts, like heads and torsos, in a wardrobe or maybe under the bathtub. But the smaller bits, organs, tissue, he started flushing them down the toilet.
Flushing human remains down the toilet in a block of flats. Yeah, that seems destined to fail.
And it did. Which brings us to February 1983. Dinah Rod gets called out. There's a major blockage at Cranley Gardens.
The plumber goes down to investigate the drains.
Opens the manhole outside and finds, well, rotting human flesh and small bones clogging everything up. He and a neighbor were obviously alarmed, suspected what it was.
And Nilsen's reaction, that infamous quote.
Yeah, he tried to play it down incredibly. Told them, "It looks to me like someone has been flushing down their Kentucky Fried Chicken."
Just the sheer nerve of that. Or maybe detachment.
Complete detachment, even as it was all falling apart. So the police arrive, led by DCIJ. They questioned Nilsen that evening.
Did he try to lie then?
No, he was apparently calm, waiting for them. When they asked about the smell, asked, where's the rest of the body? He confessed. Immediately.
Just like that. Admitted everything.
Pretty much. Almost seemed cooperative. Admitted to 15 or 16 victims going back to 1978. He even took the police back to Melrose Avenue, showed them exactly where he used to burn the bodies in the garden.
But the motive. Why did he do it?
That's the chilling part. He never gave a clear reason. Later, in court, when asked why, his response was something like, "I had hoped you could tell me that," as if he didn't understand it himself or just wouldn't say.
That lack of motive, or maybe refusal to give one, leads us into the trial in 1983 and the systemic failures that let him get away with it for so long.
Okay. The trial started October 83. Nilsen pleaded not guilty. His defense was diminished responsibility, meaning his lawyers argued his mental state was impaired. They brought in psychiatrists who talked about schizoid disturbances, even something called false self syndrome.
What do they mean by false self syndrome in this context?
The idea was basically that he'd created this functional persona, the civil servant, the ex-policeman, to cope with the world, but it was just a mask. Disconnected from the underlying pathology. They argued the real Nilsen was mentally diseased, so not fully responsible legally.
So one side says false self, mentally impaired. The other side says...
The prosecution said he knew exactly what he was doing. They had his incredibly detailed confession, took 4 hours just to read it to the jury. And crucially, they had testimony from 3 men who survived his attacks.
Paul Nobbs, Douglas Stewart, Carl Stoddard. Proof he'd tried to kill before.
Exactly. Living proof. So after all the psychiatric arguments back and forth, the judge basically cut through the jargon. He told the jury, essentially, that a mind can be evil without being abnormal.
And the jury agreed.
They did. Found him guilty of 6 counts of murder, 2 of attempted murder, life imprisonment.
But connecting this back, the sources argue many of those later victims shouldn't have died, that they were missed opportunities.
Huge missed opportunities. Systemic failures, really. We know Andrew Ho reported an attempted murder by Nilsen in 1979. Douglas Stewart reported one in 1980.
And what happened with those reports?
They were essentially dismissed. Stewart's case, incredibly, was just written off as an alcohol-fueled lover's quarrel.
A lover's quarrel. That suggests prejudice played a role, doesn't it? Assumptions based on their orientation.
That's precisely what the sources argue. That homophobia and general indifference towards a victim who were often homeless runaways, seen as marginalized, meant their reports weren't taken seriously.
Police lost all interest is a phrase used in the sources.
Yeah. As soon as homosexuality or their vulnerable status came up, interest apparently dropped. So, no proper investigation, no search of Nilsen's flat, despite credible reports of violence.
And the devastating conclusion is that this negligence allowed Nilsen to kill, as the sources put it, many more times.
It wasn't good police work that stopped him in the end. It was a blocked drain. The system failed these victims repeatedly.
So, recapping this incredibly dark deep dive, Nilsen, the former Army cook, the ex-policeman, fueled by childhood trauma and acute loneliness. His methods evolved from boiling and burning bodies at Melrose Avenue to flushing remains at Cranley Gardens. That final, desperate method led to his capture and his almost unnervingly calm confession to 15 or 16 murders.
He died in prison in 2018, convicted of 6 murders, but confessed to many more. Because of the poor initial investigations, the destruction of evidence, many potential victims remain unidentified. families without answers.
And that brings us to a final thought for you. Given the context of the known failures, the likely prejudice involved back then, and the fact that several potential victims are still just possibles, unidentified decades later, how important is it, do you think, to use today's forensic technology like DNA to reopen these cold cases, to try and finally give those remaining families some definitive answers, even now?
Thank you for listening to Barske Studio True Crime. The story you've heard is just one of many hidden in the shadows of Nordic history. We release new episodes every week, exploring fresh true stories, from haunting mysteries to chilling crimes. Subscribe and join us next week as we uncover another untold truth. This was Barske Studio True Crime, told by AI with no emotion and no filter.